So, welcome to the Herbal Lens. I'm Lolo, a doctoral student in acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine, an ethnobotanical researcher and writer, and a community herbalist, lifelong student of plants, the land, the rituals, and the stories that bind them all together. It's been about 6 years since I last sat behind this microphone, and in that time, life, like the seasons, has shifted and ripened. Motherhood, study, and the slow work of tending both soil and spirit have changed how I listened. So this space returns now as a living conversation between ethnobotany and everyday life, between traditional Chinese medicine and folk traditions, between personal healing and cultural remembering. Each episode will explore the medicine of plants, places, and people through story, research, and lived experience. You'll hear from herbalists, farmers, clinicians, and wisdom keepers, sometimes just me reflecting on the messy beauty of becoming. For this first episode back, I'm so honored to share a conversation with Mary Maniti, the founder and curator of the Italian Garden Project, a story rooted in heritage gardening, cultural memory, and the ways our ancestors' hands still shape the soil beneath our own. So, pour a cup of tea, step into the garden with me, and let's look closer together. Welcome, Mary. It's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for sharing
Oh,
time with us.
thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on your one of your first new episodes.
Thank you. I have a funny story of how I kind of met Mary. I had come back to the Pittsburgh area after many years away and stumbled across an Instagram post announcing a dinner with the Italian Garden Project. And I showed up because I didn't see that it was a ticketed event, not only a ticketed event, but sold out event. I showed up and experienced. No one checked me at the door. It was very like an Italian experience where you're learning and people are eating. And then I realized thereafter, like, oh my gosh, I just came into this party. Like, what? I, of course, donated later. But so that was how I met Mary. And she was on her way to Italy right directly after the project. So I fell in love, and I would love if you would share the story of how the Italian Garden Project began for you, and especially what inspired you personally to start preserving the traditions that you are doing.
Thank you. Well, I am so glad you stumbled upon my event. You were meant to be there, whether you had signed up and or not. I was so glad that our paths crossed at that point. But yeah, so I am the founder of the Italian Garden Project. I founded it over a decade ago um, because I had grown up. Immersed in Italian culture. My all of my grandparents were Italian immigrants, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and especially my paternal grandfather, who was the gardener in my life. Now, my maternal grandfather had also been a gardener, but he had passed before I was born, and his gardens were legendary in the family. But I never really got to spend time with him. But so I got to tag along behind my paternal grandfather in the garden. He had come from Italy at 16 years old in 1912, and had come from an agricultural background, like probably the majority of all immigrants that came to the U.S., but especially Italian immigrants that came, in the first wave of immigration from about the late 1880s to the 1920s. And his was that typical immigrant story, left Southern Italian poverty, basically the oldest of five children, was the only one from his family then to venture out to start a new life and make money that his family didn't have. And he would came and made the bit of money that immigrants did, but was able to send some back to his family as well to help them survive pretty hard times. So he retired from the National Radiator Company in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, about the time I was born. He had come from the province of Caserta in Campania region of Italy, in a little town called Sant'Angelo d'Alife, and he settled in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and married and raised my father and my aunt, and did the typical immigrant story. Started in the coal mines, then ended up working in like I said, the National Radiator Company, which was basically a steel mill of some kind, but retired about the time I was born. And although he had always had a garden, even when he worked full time, it was after retirement when he really came back and to the garden, the way of life that he really knew growing up, that really connected him back to his roots, to the memories of his family, and he just spent his days so happily tending his garden, tending his few chickens, tending a couple sheep that he had. And I got to experience that. And I'm so very, very lucky. I not only learned about nature, connected with nature through him, but also learned about what it's like to be doing something that is so satisfying, that where he wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else in the world, wouldn't have wanted to, you couldn't have given him anything in the world, all the riches in the world, that would have made him any happier than being in his garden. It was just a sense of peace, a sense of joy, a sense of at-homeness when he was in his garden. And that really rubbed off on me, that the garden can bring that kind of joy, that kind of connection to nature, can be so satisfying. So he, I was so lucky. I had him to be with him into my 20s, but then he passed, and then I went on to raise my family, and got more and more away from the garden, away from Italian traditions, until I moved with my young family to a community that had a really strong Italian population, but post-World War II immigrants. So they were of the second wave of immigration when Italians came post-World War II until really into the late 70s. And I had never known that second wave, but they were my neighbors, so I got to hang out with them, and I realized, wait, they're doing everything just like I remember my grandfather and grandparents were doing when I was growing up. And I just wanted to be with them. They were so, reminded me so much of my childhood and my grandfather, because I saw again that joy of being in the garden, especially when they saw that I was so interested and I wanted to, ask them questions, and I admired so much of what they were doing, and they really felt proud to share that with me. And then I realized, wow, I hadn't been paying enough attention when my grandfather was alive and he was doing all those things. I just took it all for granted that it was going to be there forever. And so I thought, these folks are right here doing these amazing, amazing things right in the backyards of, a residential backyard, a suburban backyard. It wasn't, they were on farms. They weren't, on acres and acres. They were in little backyards, and they were able to produce so much food, and their basements were filled with so many preserved things, sausages and olives and tomatoes, and it was, it was the early 2000s, and this was, we were finally waking up to the benefits of local, natural, and seasonal, and here it was all right there in these backyards. And they were so under the radar screen, because these folks who had been born in Italy and come as young adults just just took what they did for granted. They didn't think it was anything special. And they were even somewhat embarrassed, that they were, might have had chickens, or they were, working in the garden all day in the soil, because they were sort of, trying to be American and trying to, sort of blend in, but they wanted to keep their traditions as well. So it was, I really, was amazed that all of that old world lifestyle was still going on. So I started bringing my friends to these. I said, you have to see what's in the backyard. They had known these houses from the street, but had no idea what was going on in the backyard or in the basements of these houses. So I would share it, and eventually it just grew. I started sharing it more and more. I actually organized a fundraiser for our local nature center, giving a little tour of these gardens that were all in a particular area of the little town that I lived in. And every tour was sold out, and we had to keep adding more because people loved it. They just loved that experience of not only feeling like you were in Italy by being in your own neighborhood, but just the whole feeling of that surrounded by the beautiful gardens, by seeing these traditions. Really, some people felt like they were a blast from the past, and actually. The last house on the tour, we ended up under a grape arbor, and I would serve limoncello and biscotti, and it was hard to get people to leave. I mean, they loved it. People, whether they were Italian or not Italian, it was just every time I walk into these homes, I don't even want to leave because you feel so welcome. People are so generous, and so that's how the project grew, and it just grew from there. I just began to see the need to preserve this, all these traditions, that became Italian American traditions that were part of our Italian American culture and our history, and we needed it for so many reasons, many reasons. We needed to preserve and demonstrate and share what was going on in these households.
Yeah. So, what are some of the heirloom plants and varieties that you are preserving? Because I've seen on your website and going to the it was like a dinner where you were sharing some of the plants people had put in. It was like an auction, and they could come in and they were getting these plants that had been their heirloom. Like it's really valuable. It's a heritage, right? Just very deeply cultural significance that's there. So what are some of the heirloom plants and varieties that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so when I started visiting these homes, not only in the Pittsburgh area where I started, but branched out to Cleveland and Baltimore, and just branched out, and then ended up traveling all over the country to visit these homes. And one thing I realized that the seeds that were planted and saved every year were often seeds that came from the villages from which these folks came decades ago, sometimes 100 years ago, and no one was recognizing their value. They loved their nono's pepper or whatever, but when he passed, not a lot of them were gardening, and not a lot of them recognized that these are heirlooms. These are the heirlooms of our culture. And then realizing that some of the seeds were no longer even being planted in the villages from which they came. There was a seed, there's a story I read about in Stockton, California, where a seed that come over 100 years prior had to be reintroduced to the Liguria area of Italy because it no longer was available there. So we are in some ways like a time capsule here in the US, because we have seeds that, are old and may have are no longer in existence in Italy. So, I began to recognize the importance of these seeds. And then with the need for biodiversity and climate issues, and how important and valuable these seeds were on so many levels. So I began to be the caretaker of these seeds. And we've amassed quite a collection. We have over 60 varieties of seeds. And I have volunteers throughout the country that help grow out and keep these seeds viable. But we've also started making them available on trueloveseeds.com. It's a great organization in Philadelphia, a small organization that really supports culturally important seeds. We have the Italian garden collection there, but also they have the Iranian collection, and really preserving culturally significant seeds. So I'm really grateful to them. And then every seed packet, they give a portion back to the nonprofit, the Italian Garden Project. But we have all kinds of seeds, and of course a lot of different tomato varieties that of tomatoes come in every shape and size in the Italian garden. Tomatoes that don't even look like tomatoes, look more like peppers, and just unusual varieties. And I love it because they're never, they don't say, oh, this is an early girl or whatever tomato. It's like, oh, that's Zio Cardamomini's tomato. Or, none of these, people ask me all the time, oh, what variety is it? It's a variety that came from their village that was handed down for generations through families. And because it was never commercially made available, it didn't have a common name that was recognizable commercially. It was just whatever the local family called it. So we have, so if I can't say we have this well-known variety, but we have very many unique varieties of tomatoes, of peppers, of flat Roma pole beans, which is one of my favorite things. If you eat those, then you wonder why we buy the regular green bean in the grocery store. These are just the most lovely, tender, meaty bean, and I have many varieties within that family of Roma pole beans. I also come across really interesting greens that are hard to identify. Some greens, even professional growers can't identify because they're just such unique varieties, especially within the greens family. And so we're trying to preserve all of these, trying to get them out to the public, which is a way not only to help fund the project, but it's a way to keep these seeds viable and alive and in circulation.
How do you go about, like, you've been doing this for over a decade, but how do you go about finding and documenting finding these gardeners and their stories? Are you just like, is like a trail of breadcrumbs that you
Yeah, sometimes it's really it's a challenge sometimes, but sometimes especially now as the project has grown. I mean, we are now a national organization, so people hear about me and they'll write to me and say, oh, you have to come visit my grandfather, or you have to come visit my parents. They're just like the folks on your website. They're just like that. And I love that. That just warms my heart, especially when a grandchild or child is so proud of their parent that they know how special they are and they want to share them with me. I just visited a family in New Jersey like that about a month ago, and it was an absolute joy to spend time with that family that had come from Calabria. But also, I try to, a good source of finding gardeners is through Italian societies, like Italian American groups, the Calabria Club or the Abruzzo Club. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, you got to go talk to Gaetano. He's got the good garden. So, yeah, it's fun. I love it. I love connecting with the Italian American community anywhere across the country. I mean, no matter where I go, I feel like I'm at home when I connect with them.
When you are visiting Italy and such, are you talking to any of the gardeners or farmers or backyard people? Are you there talking with them as well?
Oh yeah, I can't help it. I'm constantly asking questions. I love it. I spend a lot of time in Abruzzo. I think we talked
Yeah.
about, and um, I am especially in a little village where I've gotten to know a lot of people, and they know of my interest, and I know the people to go to when I have a question. Oh, is this the fig that you talked about? You know, that I've heard about, or is this the wild herb that they collect in the mountains? And so yeah, I love it, and and then I end up gravitating toward those folks who have that kind of knowledge. And I'm always, can I video this, do you mind if I, and I'm sticking a camera in front of their face. And but the people are, when they see that you're genuinely interested and that you have no ulterior motives other than just a love of what they're doing, and because they see how these traditions are dying out, and they see that they're one of the last ones with this knowledge. So anytime there's someone who's interested, um, they understand the value of passing it along.
hmm As you're doing this, so from an ethnobotanical background, and some people are like, "What the heck is ethnobotany?" And I'm like, it's just the study of like plants and people and how a culture and all of it's together, and then we are trying to document that knowledge so that we don't lose it because plants and the people came first and the science later. And so it's like the science is trying to catch up, especially, ethnobotany shows how we use it for food and shelter and medicine and textiles and fuel and all of the things. And as we have been displaced and moved and migrated, um, we have lost some things. And so now it's trying to go back. It's almost like this remembering of sorts, right? So have you seen in because we're talking about food and gardening and all the things, and you're traveling around the nation and different continents, and have you seen the knowledge there along with healing aspects, like medicinal aspects? Because first and foremost, they were practicing herbalism informally. It wasn't like they're like, I'm an herbalist. It was like,
Right.
no, we're doing this
Just what we
because
do.
it's what we do. Have you talked to anyone or seen along your path ways that people are healing themselves, like how the grandmas and the grandpas and the aunties and the uncles are using it for medicine?
Right. Yes. Yes. I love when I uh, have the chance to someone to share about an herb or something, that they collect in the wild or something they grow. I have a great little video of my dear friend Marietta. I was one of the folks that I originally in my neighborhood that I originally would visit for the project, and she would grow camomilla. Cagomilla was what in the dialect of Calabria. That's where cagomilla, but it's chamomile basically. And I would just show up one day. She'd be cutting it, and then she'd be drying it, and then showing me how to make tea with it, and just simple things like that, and telling me how when the babies were colicky, they would give them the chamomile to soothe their stomach. And but I recently am so lucky to I think I mentioned about my Greek my daughter's mother-in-law, who's Greek on the island of Icaria. And so my grandson spends time with her there, and me either in the US or in Italy. But she often gives him teas if he has a cold or a sore throat, and from herbs that she collects in the mountain of this island. And I sometimes I want to just like, oh, I should hang out with her all summer and learn all the Greek, these amazing Greek traditions that she knows, and then she's one of the last wisdom keepers on that island. And feel so grateful that my little 2-year-old grandson gets to hang out with her. They were harvesting olives. So they just sent me a video yesterday. They were harvesting olives. So yeah, so all cultures have this amazing ancestral knowledge that we are losing painfully quickly, and it just Yeah, it breaks my heart, but we try to do what we can do. But we can, as far as recording and preserving, but we can only do so much.
Yeah, it's true. So when you've gone through this whole, I mean, it is a story how you've started, but what have you seen has been the most moving or perhaps surprising story that you've encountered through this whole work? Maybe it was someone you encountered or something within yourself that you're like, wow, I didn't expect that.
Through the work. Um, it, how it's evolved from just about the physical aspects of the garden, saving the seeds, saving the fig trees that they brought over, and how it's really evolved into the way of life as conducive to well-being.
Mm.
That to me now is as much of the project, trying to show how a way of life connected to nature, a way of life connected to traditions, to ancestral wisdom, keep putting your hands in the soil, eating your traditional food, how and the garden, the stories that I hear from the gardeners of growing up and how having to come from this agricultural way of life was was conducive to community. How it people needed each other. They always say, in America, nobody needs each other. We're all independent. We love, there we needed each other. And it gave them a sense of community that we know now is one of the things that contributes to well-being, that contributes to physical health. So even though their life was very, very hard, I often see them talking about missing having to work together, having to make the sausage together, having to make wine together, having to harvest the wheat together. And there's almost a sadness that I see that they don't have that ability, that community that they grew up with. And it's such a irony. I mean, they're happy that they don't have, it was hard work. I mean, they didn't leave Italy because, they were wealthy. They were poor. They were sometimes hungry. It was a hard way of life. But when they left the bad, they also left this good part behind, this sense of people around all the time, the village life, even the small village where you wash clothes with your neighbor at the fountain, and you just shared in so much more community every day. And that's really the part of the whole sense of well-being that I am so interested in, that makes these folks live, because they're still very communal here. Even they have big families and they share, but so how important that sense of community is to them, and what a loss it is when they don't have it like they had it, and just the whole lifestyle that contributes to a sense of health and well-being.
Yeah. So in doing this project, I mean, it's really going to, you're talking about your 2-year-old grandson, but even those who are before him, the younger generations who are disconnected from their roots, sometimes knowing it, sometimes not knowing it. How do you see like this ancestral gardening tradition? How do you see that? How do you see it in your vision being reclaimed by these younger generations?
Well, I have seen, even, like I said, I started this over a decade ago. I have seen this resurgence in interest, thank goodness, at least in a small segment of the population. But even in Italy, when I used to visit 20 years ago, and I would talk about the seeds, or I talk about their old tools, and I'd look in their tool sheds and they'd be embarrassed. But now in the younger generation, even there, is starting to recognize the value of that peasant way of life, the contadini. And it's not so embarrassing, to come from that way of life. So I think as we recognize the value that, generation ago was trying to run from, not to identify with, as young people are not afraid to identify with nature and the garden, and their cultural roots. I think people are getting more into wanting to know their cultural roots, and how it's related, that they maybe came from peasant stock, but now we're really not as embarrassed of that as we were a generation or two ago. So I'm hoping, some days I feel more hopeful than others that these traditions will be kept up, that people will embrace nature more, and but yeah, some days I'm more hopeful than others.
So on that, your hope, what do you hope people feel or perhaps remember when they're experiencing the Italian Garden Project? What is your hope for that?
Yeah, I hope it gives them an alternative, an alternative um, way of life, that they see this way of life, how their ancestors lived. I mean, I always think about it as those folks came here, because they had to, and they didn't have a choice of, in so many ways. They had to work hard, they had to and they wanted, the next generation to get an education. They wanted them to not have to have these things. But and now we did. A lot of us, didn't, embrace the garden and everything the way our grandparents did. But by showing them that way of life, and then now being in the comfort of being able to choose the kind of life we want to live. I want now we can now go back and reclaim things that we had to maybe move away from for whatever reasons. But we are in such a comfortable position now, as most of us, not that we're wealthy, but we're in a place where we can have choices. And I want to show them a way of life so they can choose what to take from the past to bring into their future, not go back and live like their grandparents did, because it was, I don't know if any of us could are that hardy, but look to the past and really embrace the good, don't forget the good, and bring it with us as we move into the future.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like our future is an integration of the past where you're like, you can do science and education and also stay connected, right? It's the ancients were so wise, where you're going, how do we have access to so much? And sometimes it feels like perhaps we're dumber. But it's like, how do we integrate the past with that? And especially connection, because I feel like it's a key component where we are, and everybody sees this as like, here's plants, here's animals, here's this. And it's like, actually, it's a whole ecosystem. And
Exactly.
how are we connecting with that? So I thank you for doing this work.
Thank
And
you.
the Italian, I saw within the past 48 hours on social media, you made an announcement for the Italian Garden Project. So will you share what's next for the Italian Garden Project? What's coming up?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for letting me talk about our new chapter. I've done this sort of as a passion project, mainly on my own for over a decade, like I said, and it's just grown so much, and I saw the need for it to expand, to help preserve those seeds, those fig trees, this lifestyle, the stories, and I had an amazing volunteer group throughout the country, and now it's really time to officially make it a national project. This isn't a local project. So we are going to still be the Italian Garden Project, but we are the national organization for Italian American gardening heritage. So because I still am amazed that it's not being done out there, and it almost it's overwhelming that it's not being done because there's so much to do out there. But so expanding the project really to honor our ancestors is, I feel, a responsibility to grow the project into what it needs to be to honor this whole tradition and lifestyle.
That's so amazing. It's our ancestors survived. They made it, right? And we've now reached a place of thriving. And sometimes surviving meant like just that, surviving no creativity. We couldn't think outside the scope of this. And what a blessing that we're standing on their shoulders, able to create something, to preserve something, to be able to not only take what they've done, but grow it, right? Like in a garden. Like that's it. Like they've cultivated the soil for us and we're like, so we get to step in and build from their soil, which I just, it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank
what I'm gonna end with this, but what, let's say, medicine or plant or practice or memory is guiding you in your life right now? Like, where are you at that, as we grow as a human, everything tends to influence us. What was 10 years ago when you started, but now in 2025 is when we're recording this. What is it that's guiding you right now?
as like a specific plant or something that's speaking
Plant,
to
a
me.
memory, a practice where you're like, you know what, this is influencing me so much that I can't ignore it. I can say personally, like mine is, as you can see here on the herbal lens of
Yeah, I
saffron.
see.
It came
Yes.
to me. It's part of my research that I'm doing. It took me back to my roots in Abruzzo with my matrilineal line, and so I couldn't understand it. I didn't really know much about it, but then suddenly it was there, just going, hey, try this.
No, exactly. Oh, I know exactly what it is for me, and it's the fig tree. I mean, the fig is it's just grown to be a symbol for me of this whole project. You know, these fig trees that in Italy grow so abundantly, they're everywhere, and they provide usually two crops of fresh food in the in the midsummer and then late summer, and then they can be dried and eaten all winter. So for the Italian, when they came here, that were so familiar with the fig, they came here and they brought their little cuttings of fig trees with them, not only because they loved that taste of fig, but it also meant it's going to help me survive in the new world. It's going to help, I can have food, because sometimes dried figs were all families had to eat all winter. So they knew no matter what, the fig would help them thrive. So the fig really has become a symbol for the project. A transplanted Mediterranean plant thriving and adapting in a new world is really symbolic of who these immigrants were, and the fact that they could make a Mediterranean plant survive in the northeast of the US and into Canada and places where fig trees aren't supposed to grow, and had that and brought with them that kind of knowledge. So it represents who they were, that food and plants were so important to them, and that the fig was something that was meant survival and food for them. So something so basic. And so I just have such fond memories. I have both of my grandfather's fig trees. I have cuttings from both sides, from both sides. And so I preserve fig trees. So it's one of my most precious possessions that I have. And I'm actually in the middle of writing a children's book about the experience of called Nonno and his fig tree, Grandpa and his fig tree, and about he and I tending his fig tree when I was growing up. So yeah, the fig it's near and dear to my heart. Let's say that.
I love that so much. I've always said, like, my dream is when I move into a place, I always look to see if the place has a fig tree. We just left a farm that was in Virginia, and they had a fig tree that had been growing there for, I don't know, 50, 60 years outside the window. And that's how you could tell the season, like where we were. And then you'd see all the wildlife come up and you're going, oh my gosh, like there are things that are eating this. And that's always been like, oh, I need a fig tree near,
I know where you can get one.
that and Italian plums, like they're just, I'm obsessed with them.
And
I
plums.
can't even,
Yes.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can't explain it where you're just like, I need this. And in the autumn time, especially when we were in Pittsburgh, I think we talked about this before. It was someone had was selling them. He didn't speak much English. It was at the parking lot in the zoo. And he gave them to me and I went home and I grilled them and I had them with pork chops and we did like a little sauce over the top and it was I cried. I wept over my meal because you're like, what is happening to me?
Yeah, honestly. Yeah. That and those food memories are way back there somewhere.
It's so
Yeah.
incredible. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Like just doing what you do for our local communities, the global community. I mean, you're at the national level and the global level. I'm so looking forward to just staying connected and watching what transpires because I feel like this is the future is how are we remembering, you know? So truly, thank you for taking the time to be able to do this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for appreciating and encouraging this work. I really feel like we're kindred spirits, and I'm so glad
Totally.
we've met.
Yeah, thank you.
As we close the Herbal Inn podcast today, I just want to say in the diaspora of communities, the plants travel too, carrying stories, seeds, and medicines across continents. The diaspora has woven ancient botanical knowledge with new landscapes, creating herbal traditions that are alive and ever evolving. Every diaspora carries an inheritance of sacred plants, aromatic memories, and healing gestures that are never lost. Through diaspora, plants become bridges, walking roots that safeguard memory. Until next time, thank you for joining the Herbal Lens podcast today. May your days be nourished and your medicine be simple. And may the wisdom of the plants, the rhythms of the seasons, and the knowledge of your ancestors guide you always.